أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. Can you turn that on, please? أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ويوم تشقق السماء بالغمام ونزل الملائكة تنزيلا الملك يومئذ الحق للرحمن وكان يوما على الكافرين عسيرا. الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. In the previous session, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, while continuing to refute and admonish the disbelievers, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also issued to them a very severe warning, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala very powerfully and very graphically also laid out what will transpire on the day of judgment, on the day of resurrection with these people. And then in ayah number 24, where we concluded the previous session, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked about the people who will be blessed by Allah. أصحاب الجنة يومئذ خير مستقرا وأحسن مقيلا. And we talked about that in a lot of detail. In ayah number 25 and 26, along with the subsequent ayat as well, the next set of ayat that are from ayah number 27 through 29, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues to talk about the day of judgment. But in these three sets, if you will, what we studied in the previous session, what we're looking at today, and what lies ahead in the next session, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is defining the day of judgment through three different dynamics. Those who very arrogantly and insolently, belligerently disbelieved. Those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so at the end of that, so you can say four different dynamics, excuse me. The second dynamic was Allah talked about those who did believe and comply and obey and submitted to Allah. The third dynamic, which we'll be exploring today, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala overall will talk about the gravity of that day. And then in the fourth dynamic, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's a very fascinating dynamic, it's a very fascinating element of some of what that day will involve. And I'll save more discussion about that in the next session, inshallah. However, what I'll briefly mention is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the significance that a lot of a person's fate, much that has to do with a person's fate, how a person will fare on that day, has to do with the choices a person makes, what that person surrounds him or herself with, the influences that a person lets into their lives, has a lot to do with that. A tremendous amount. And it really talks about something very powerful. And again, I know I keep going kind of deeper into it, but this whole dynamic of, and we hear this rhetoric quite often, and it's actually very appropriate, the rhetoric, as far as, you know, how we interact with one another, because you're supposed to see the good in people, and you're supposed to try to find the good in people. But people, when they deal with themselves, and again, you know, a psychologist and a therapist is much better suited to kind of talk about the issues of self-esteem and self-care and whatnot. But I'm speaking from a spiritual perspective, that we also have to learn to be very honest with ourselves about where we are spiritually and what our issues and problems are. So the rhetoric that we have sometimes about other people is that, oh, he's a really good guy, or she's a really great person, they're just in a bad element. Or they're not in an ideal environment. They're not in an ideal situation. And when we interact with other people, that's very fair, that's very good, because you're giving people the benefit of the doubt. You're trying to find the good within people, and that's our job. But when it comes to yourself, you have to make sure that you don't learn to make excuses for yourself and enable your own bad behavior by, oh, I'm a good person, there's just sometimes, you know, bad people around me. And that's the fourth dynamic that Allah will speak about what will occur on the Day of Judgment. As I said, we'll delve into that deeper in the future session. Today, starting with ayah number 25, and we'll also explore ayah number 26. In ayah number 25, وَيَوْمَ تَشَقَّقُ السَّمَاءُ بِالْغَمَامِ وَنُزِّلَ الْمَلَائِكَةُ تَنزِيلًا. One of the translators writes, on the day when the sky and its clouds are split apart, and the angels sent down in streams. Another translator mentioned, since there's something that's very nuanced about this particular ayah and the language used there, another translator writes, a day when the heavens with the clouds will be, and mention the day when the heaven will be split open with emerging clouds, and the angels will be sent down in successive descent. So, just so you hear a couple of different translations, I will delve into it. The ayah begins with the word وَيَوْمَ, right? And that means the day that, and then comes the following, the rest of the ayah, the rest of the verse. وَيَوْمَ. All right? And of course, it's talking about the day of judgment. Now, it says تَشَقَّقُ. تَشَقَّقُ. All right? So to explain this word, this comes from the root letters of Sheen, Qaf, Qaf. All right? Shaqqa, yashukku. And what that means is it means for something to split open, for something to come apart, for something to be torn apart. All right? And this verb that is used here, this fi'al, this verb that's used here is tashaqqaqu. Its actual original form is tatashaqqaqu. Tatashaqqaqu. So you see a ta in the beginning of the word there, there's supposed to be another ta in front of that. Tatashaqqaqu. In the Arabic language, and we're going to study, for the Quran intensive students, we're going to study these particular verb families and patterns and things like that. So you'll become familiar with what this is. This is from Bab Tafa'ul, Tafa'ala, Yatafa'alu. All right? Now, the thing about it is, in the Arabic language, is the Arabic language, as we've talked about, just in terms of its speech, the way it's spoken, it's a very sophisticated language. Because it was primarily an oral tradition. It was a spoken language primarily. All right? So what's very fascinating is many languages, all languages have their own, sophistication and nuance and developments. And the Arabic language has different dynamics and elements, such as you have what's called sarf, or morphology, right? Which is how you conjugate the words and derive different forms. You have the etymology, the origin of words, right? Where do they originate from in terms of meaning, and what meanings do they evolve into? Then you have syntax, nahu, where you start piecing the words together and start creating thoughts and sentences, right? Fragments and sentences and so on and so forth. All right? Then you have more elements of like ma'ani, badi', right? Balagha. You have elements of eloquence and embellishments. How can you beautify the language and add layers to the language, such as metaphors and similes and examples and so on and so forth. All right, double meanings and everything like that. There is another element to the language that is very fascinating, and we're all familiar with it. We just don't sometimes associate it with the language itself, and that is the phonetics of the language. The way the language sounds when spoken is also a very important consideration. Right? And we're all familiar with it because it's somewhat become a discipline in and of its own. Because the Quran is such a central part of every Muslim's life that it's become a discipline of its own. And that's whether you're familiar with the word makharij, the pronunciation of words, all right, or tajweed, right? The proper recitation of the Quran that involves a lot of those phonetics, the sound, how it sounds. Right? So that's an important consideration, and a lot of these different elements, they intersect and overlap, and they all work together, they all collaborate together, if you will, to form such a powerful, beautiful, eloquent, effective form of delivery. They all work together. So what would happen a lot of times is that because of the phonetics of a word, you could actually go in and alter the form, the morphology of a word. You could actually go in and tamper with the syntax, the grammar of a sentence, to create better phonetics. Think of it as aesthetics, right? That's the phonetics are the aesthetics of a language, of a spoken language, right? To make it very presentable and palatable and beautiful and interesting and engaging and so on and so forth. Almost soothing, if you will. All right? So, tatashaqqaqu, تتشقق. You got two tas and two qafs at the end, and then one of them's got a shadda on it. It becomes very heavy to pronounce. تتشقق. So what the Arabs allowed for was that you can drop one of the tas and say tashaqqaqu. And there's another example of this in the Quran as well. تتنزل. And that's why in Surah Al-Qadr, تنزل الملائكة. Right? You can abbreviate it. Right? توفى, تتوفى. You can abbreviate it. Okay? And so on and so forth. So here it can also be abbreviated. That's one. That's the fact of the matter. It can be abbreviated, and it is abbreviated here. There is a follow-up question to that, and that is, why though, or what is maybe what are some of the benefits, aside from just the phonetics of it, like what other nuances does it have in terms of its abbreviation? Right? Why abbreviate it here? And so we'll talk about that in just a moment. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَيَوْمَ تَشَقَّقُ. Now the word itself, to explain what the word means, as I explained, the root of the word means to split open, to come apart, and that's basically what this word means. It's just, when it comes to this particular form, it adds a level of emphasis. To mean completely be torn apart, to completely come apart in a way that it can be put back together again. Alright? And in the Arabic language, الشَّقُّ الصُّدْعُ فِي عَوْدٍ أَوْ حَائِطٍ أَوْ زُجَاجَةٍ. It is like a piece of wood coming apart, or a wall becoming cracked, or a glass being broken. It's never going to be the same ever again. Even if you are able to piece it back together somehow, hold it together somehow, it's not the same anymore. Alright? So that's the meaning of it. And it's also used in the meaning of creating difficulty. Because when you apply pressure to something, what does it do under pressure? It cracks. That's why the Prophet ﷺ said, لَوْلَا أَنْ أَشُقَّ عَلَىٰ أُمَّتِي. لولا أن أشق على أمتي. If I was not fearful about applying too much pressure upon my ummah and them cracking under that pressure, لأمرتهم بالسواك عند كل صلاة. I would have obligated them to do siwak, to brush their teeth before every prayer. To brush their teeth before every prayer. That was the emphasis on hygiene from the Prophet ﷺ, health and hygiene, right? This idea of somehow my religiousness makes me a slob, all right? That is nonsensical. It's unimaginable. It's preposterous. You read the Shama'il, you read about the Prophet ﷺ and how clean and impeccable and presentable he was. He was simple. Simple. Al-badadatu min as-sunnah. The Prophet ﷺ said, Al-badadatu min al-iman. Simplicity is from sunnah. Right? But filthiness is not from the sunnah. And we can't mistake simplicity for filthiness. Anyways. Sounds like I'm yelling at a bunch of people. Alright, so it's like yelling at kids. Go clean yourself. Right? So moving on, before I get carried away. Alright? Too late. So وَيَوْمَ تَشَقَّقُ السَّمَاء. The day that the sky will just come apart. Will be tore apart. And this is something Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about many places in the Quran. This is from the horrors and part of the, terror of the day of resurrection, of the day of judgment. Min ahwali yawm al-qiyamah. Right? That's one of the things that's going to make the day of judgment so overwhelming. Alright? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Rahman, فَإِذَا انشَقَّتِ السَّمَاءُ فَكَانَتْ وَرْدَةً كَالدِّهَانِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Rahman talks about that when the sky will be completely split open. And Surah Al-Haqqah, Allah in ayah number 15 and 16, Allah talks about it. فَيَوْمَئِذٍ وَقَعَتِ الْوَاقِعَةِ. That on that day, that the great event and the great... Sorry, he just walking away keeps looking back at me. So, on that day, the great event and the great occurrence will happen. And then Allah says, وَالسَّمَاءُ فَهِيَ يَوْمَئِذٍ وَاهِيَةٌ. The sky will just completely be torn apart, ripped apart. Alright? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, Surah Al-Inshiqaq, very famously, إِذَا السَّمَاءُ انشَقَّتْ. Another place in Juz' Amma as well, Allah says, إِذَا السَّمَاءُ فَطَرَتْ. Will be broken, smashed up. Alright? Allah says, فَإِذَا النُّجُومُ طُمِسَتْ. The stars will be wiped out, extinguished. وَإِذَا السَّمَاءُ فُرِجَتْ, the sky will be ripped open. وَفُتِحَتِ السَّمَاءُ فَكَانَتْ أَبْوَابًا. And the reason why I mentioned this ayah last, because it's going to lead us into the next part of our conversation. Allah says that the sky will be opened up and it will be like gates. Doors have opened up in the sky. So it's not just meaningless. It's not just like a display of just, frustration or anger, just smashing something. But it will be opened up. And that opening up will serve a purpose. And Allah mentions that in the second part of this ayah, as I read the translation before. And I'll get to that part in just a moment. One last thing I want to mention. وَيَوْمَ تَشَقَّقُ السَّمَاءُ, the day the sky will be ripped open, بِالْغَمَامِ. بِالْغَمَامِ. Now the word ghamam, just to explain to you, ghamam refers to clouds, like dense clouds, heavy clouds. Alright? But the word clouds is mentioned with the preposition ba, bil ghamam. With the ba. And the ba can have many different meanings, and based off of that, I read you two translations, and they both, I don't know if you picked up on the subtle difference in the translations. One said that the sky will be ripped open with the clouds. Like along with the clouds. Like you see the sky, it's covered with clouds. The sky will be ripped open and the clouds will be ripped apart. That's one meaning. With. Okay? Another meaning is that the sky will be ripped open with emerging clouds. That translator had written. I can try to simplify the language. The sky will be ripped open with clouds coming out of it. With clouds coming out of it. Due to the clouds, if you want to say that. Because the ba can be sababiyya. Because of the clouds. So there's these clouds that will be pushing through the sky and will force the sky to just rip apart. With these clouds coming out. Now, if we take the first meaning that I mentioned, that it'll be ripped open along with the clouds, okay, you get the point of that. Like the sky as we see it, is completely ripped apart. Okay? But the second meaning is like, basically saying there are these clouds that will push through, tear through, and rip holes open into the sky. وَفُتِحَتِ السَّمَاءُ فَكَانَتْ أَبْوَابًا. And to understand that, to explain that, like what does that exactly mean? What does that refer to? That basically, there are many narrations to the effect that that is what initially people will think they see, or that's what it'll look like. وَنُزِّلَ الْمَلَائِكَةُ تَنْزِيلًا. And the angels will descend down. The angels will be sent down. The angels will be sent down in waves. تَنْزِيلًا, in waves. In huge, unbelievable, overwhelming, scary numbers. Unbelievable numbers. So it'll seem like these are just like these dark clouds are like ripping holes into the sky and just coming out from there. But it'll actually just be a ton of angels, these waves of angels that'll be coming down from the sky. Right? And that's how it all kind of adds together and comes together. And there are many athar, many narrations, many aqwal, many explanations and sayings from the companions radiyallahu ta'ala anhum, that further elaborate on this and talk about this. Abdul bin Abbas radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma, he says, Inna hadhihi sama in shaqqat. Inna hadhihi sama idan shaqqat. Nazara minha min al-malaikati akthar min al-jinni wal-ins. Mind you, this is on the day of mahshar. Alright, this day of judgment. Allah has already said, وَيَوْمَ يَحْشُرُهُمْ. We will gather all of them together. All of humanity, all of the jinn, every single creation of God is gathered together. But so many angels, that sky will be ripped open and so many angels will come down that they will far outnumber the humans and the jinn gathered together on that day. And this will just be from the first layer of the heavens. Then will come the angels from the second layer of the heavens. And it mentions that when these angels come down, they will surround. وَالْمَلَكُ عَلَىٰ أَرْجَائِهَا. وَالْمَلَكُ عَلَىٰ أَرْجَائِهَا. The Quran says in Surah Al-Haqqa, they'll surround the human beings and the jinn. وَذَلِكَ يَوْمُ التَّلَاقِ. right? And then the angels from the second layer of the heavens will come down, and they will be even more in number than the angels of the first heaven. And they'll come and also surround and add another layer. Then the third, then the fourth, then the fifth, then the sixth, then the seventh, and the number will be greater every single time. It will be so overwhelming. They'll be completely surrounded. And then he mentions that the angels, like Allah mentions, وَالْمَلَكُ عَلَىٰ أَرْجَائِهَا وَيَحْمِلُ عَرْشَ رَبِّكَ فَوْقَهُمْ يَوْمَئِذٍ ثَمَانِيَةٌ. Then the 8 angels, حَمَلَةُ الْعَرْشِ, those who carry the arsh, the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they will come down. And the narration mentions that they will be so huge that just the distance from their ankle to their knee, in one narration, will be 500 years. One narration mentions 70 years, and some of the scholars corroborate between the narrations that the distance, if you actually measured it, would be that would take 500 years to cover. But the narration that mentions 70 years is, it'll take 70 years to just fully keep on looking up. Like the people will just stare at just the leg of the angel trying to figure out what they're looking at for 70 years. Be like, 70 years? Well, don't forget, مِقْدَارُهُ خَمْسِينَ أَلْفَ سَنَةٍ. The day of judgment will be 50,000 years. So you got plenty of time. So the person will just stare at the feet, the legs of these angels for 70 years, unable to comprehend, grasp what he's looking at. Another narration in which the Prophet ﷺ said, authentic narration, أُذِنَ لِي أَنْ أُحَدِّثَ عَنْ مَلَكٍ مِّن مَلَائِكَةِ حَمَلَةِ الْعَرْشِ. That I was granted permission to tell you a little something about the angels that carry the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he goes on to mention that ما بين شحمة أذنه إلى عاتقه مسيرة 70 سنة. That the distance from the earlobe to the top of the shoulder, you see this distance right here, will be 70 years. That it would take a human being 70 years. How far would a human being walk in 70 years? Measure up those miles, that's the distance just between the earlobe and the top of the shoulder, right? Alright, so humongous angels. And it mentions so powerfully that these angels will come down. And the narration mentions that كُلُّ مَلَكٍ مِّنْهُمْ وَاضِعٌ رَأْسَهُ بَيْنَ ثَدِيَيْهِ. And they will be so humble because they remain in the presence of Allah. They'll be so humble that their heads will be bowed down all the way to the point where their chin is resting on their chest. Because they are in the company of Allah. And they'll be saying the praises of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Subhan al-Malik al-Quddus. Subhan al-Malik al-Quddus. How absolutely perfect is Allah, the King, the one who is pure and above all imperfections. And they'll be saying this. And then the narrations mention that it is at that time, وَيَأْتِ الرَّبُّ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself will come, will arrive in a way that befits His majesty. We're not able to comprehend, and nor are we supposed to fiddle with these things. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will come. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will judge amongst the people. So this is what's mentioned. What it's talking about. وَنُزِّلَ الْمَلَائِكَةُ تَنْزِيلًا. This will be that process. Alright? Now, some of the things that I felt were very fascinating is that the scholars have discussed, why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring this up here? Why does Allah talk about this here? It's because that the demand, the blasphemous demand that these people, the disbelievers, had made earlier, what did they say? Why don't the angels come down? First they said, why didn't the angel come to him and be with him everywhere he goes? Then they said, why don't the angels come and talk to us? Come to us, come visit us, come talk to us. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling them, you want the angels to come down? You better be careful what you wish for. The angels will come. But it won't be the way you envision it. That won't be pleasant on that day. Alright, so that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the angels coming down. هل ينظرون إلا أن يأتيهم الله في ظلل من الغمام والملائكة وَجَاءَ رَبُّكَ وَالْمَلَكُ صَفًّا صَفًّا. This is the ayah I wanted to mention from Surah Al-Fajr, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning that when the angels come down, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will come for the judgment as the angels are all lined up. And we talked about how the angels will come, line up, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will come to have the judgment. وَمَا نُنَزِّلَ الْمَلَائِكَةُ إِلَّا بِالْحَقِّ وَمَا كَانُوا إِذًا مُنْظَرِينَ. Allah says, we will send down the angels, but we'll send down the angels when we think the time is right. And these people can keep on waiting forever for the angels to come down. We'll send them down when we want to send them down. Alright? Now, the last thing that I wanted to... The two last things that I wanted to mention here. Number one is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about splitting the sky open, destroying the sky. And what's very fascinating about that, in the Quran itself, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so many places talks about how marvelous the sky is. In Surah Al-Mulk, Allah tells us, ثُمَّ رُجِعِ الْبَصَرَ كَرَّتَيْنِ يَنْقَلِبِ إِلَيْكَ الْبَصَرُ خَاسِئًا وَهُوَ حَسِيرٌ. Allah says, keep on looking at the sky over and over again, time and time again, and every single time you'll be humbled by how marvelous and beautiful and remarkable Allah has created the sky. Right? How beautifully Allah has designed the sky. You'll be blown away by it every single time. Right? Everyone's Instagram account is a witness to that, right? Everyone takes pictures of the sky, right? So that proves that point. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Fatir has said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُمْسِكُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ أَن تَزُولَا. God is the one. Other places in the Quran, وَإِذَا جَعَلَ السَّمَاءَ سَقْفًا مَحْفُوظًا. وَجَعَلْنَا السَّمَاءَ سَقْفًا مَحْفُوظًا. We made it like a roof, like a ceiling, like a covering over your head. Then Allah says, رَفَعَ السَّمَاوَاتِ بِغَيْرِ عَمَدٍ تَرَوْنَهَا. You see the sky without any pillars holding it up. But then Allah also tells us, as I was mentioning from Surah Fatir, ayah number 41, Surah 35, ayah 41, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُمْسِكُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ أَن تَزُولَا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prevents the sky and the earth from just falling apart. وَلَئِنْ زَالَتَا إِنْ أَمْسَكَهُمَا مِنْ أَحَدٍ مِنْ بَعْدِهِ. And when the earth and the heavens finally do come apart, when the earth and the sky finally does come apart, nobody will be able to hold it together except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Once Allah lets it go, once Allah decrees that it should come apart, then there's no power, no one else that can hold it together again. And that's what that's what Allah is speaking about on the Day of Judgment. And then the last thing I was going to mention is that I had alluded to something in the very beginning, tashaqqaqu. Normally it's tatashaqqaqu. One of the tas has been dropped. And the miracle, part of the linguistic miracle of the Quran, is that yes, it's allowed to drop one of the tas because it makes it easier to pronounce it, which in and of itself is a good enough of a reason to do so. But why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does this here particularly is because in this ayah Allah talks about this unbelievable, beautiful, remarkable, breathtaking, colorful, miraculous, marvelous sky that we just can never get enough of. And it's so overwhelming and it's so vast and so great that it just seems, some would say it's probably the most beautiful thing in this world, the most beautiful thing in creation is the sky. The same sky that seems so intricate and powerful and beautiful and vast and magnificent will be gone in the blink of an eye, just like this star has vanished. Just like the star vanished, was dropped, was done, was cut off, was disposed of, the sky will just completely shatter and come apart when the command from Allah comes. Right? So warning. In ayah number 26, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, الْمُلْكُ يَوْمَئِذٍ الْحَقُّ لِلرَّحْمَنِ وَكَانَ يَوْمًا عَلَى الْكَافِرِينَ عَسِيرًا. One of the translators writes, on that day, true authority belongs to the Lord of mercy. It will be a grievous day for the disbelievers. Alright? Now, Al-Mulku, of course, refers to, we talked about before, dominion is a very common translation. Another translation many classical translators have used is sovereignty. Alright? But it refers to jurisdiction, power, control. Alright? Al-Mulk. Yawma idhin, on that day. Al-Haqqu means truly, like the truth. Justifiably, truly. Lir-Rahman. And that is, of course, one of the names and the attributes of Allah for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the most merciful, the abundantly merciful. Now, what's very interesting here is that the i'rab, the syntax, the grammatical analysis of the first part of this ayah has been the subject of a lot of discussion amongst the scholars. So, some of the scholars, they suggest that the word al-mulku would be the mubtada. What does that mean, everybody? Right, very good. MashaAllah. Don't show off. Alright, so al-mulku would be the mubtada, the subject of the sentence. Alright? The khabar would be al-haqqu. Al-haqqu. Alright? And then yawma idhin would go back to al-mulk. Is some extra information, some extra detail about al-mulk. And then lir-Rahman is some extra detail, extra information about the word al-haq. So the way that would translate is that on that day, true power, on that day the power will truly belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's how that would manifest in a translation. Some others have suggested that al-mulk is the mubtada, al-haq is the sifa, is the adjective for the word al-mulk. Al-mulk al-haqqu. True power, true sovereignty. Alright? And the khabar would be yawma idhin. True power on that day will belong to Ar-Rahman, and that would be the muta'alliq bil khabar. Alright? MBK. Alright? The third way that some scholars have looked at it is that al-mulk is the mubtada, al-haq is the adjective for al-mulk, true power. The khabar is lir-Rahman. True power belongs to the most merciful. Yawma idhin, on that day, is the extra information. So it very subtle adjustments, but it just shows you how deep and profound and versatile the Quran is. That it's basically saying all these three things at once. It's saying the power that you will witness of Allah Ar-Rahman on that day is what you call true power. It's also saying that the true power on that day specifically will only belong to Ar-Rahman, to Allah. And it's also saying that true power really truly only has ever belonged to Ar-Rahman, but it will specifically be witnessed on that day. You see all three different dynamics? And that's how all-encompassing the language and the style of the Quran is. Alright? In an authentic narration, in a sahih, authentic narration, the Prophet ﷺ says, stop it, buddy. Alright? It's my son, he just, very nice. Alright. Anyways, Inna Allah yutwi as-samawati biyaminihi. Inna Allah yutwi as-samawati biyaminihi. ويأخذ الأرضين بيده الأخرى ثم يقول أنا الملك أنا الديان أين ملوك الأرض أين الجبارون أين المتكبرون. Authentic narration, the Prophet ﷺ says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will completely just wrap up the heavens in one hand, and all the earth in the other hand. And then Allah will say, I am the king. I am the truth. And then Allah will question, where are the kings that walked around on the earth? Where are the self-proclaimed kings who walked the earth? Where are those arrogant? Where are those oppressors? Where are those arrogant, foolish human beings who thought they were in control? Where are they now? Answer. Right? So this is that true power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the second part of the ayah, He says, وَكَانَ. And one last thing, in the first part of the ayah, one thing I'll point out here, the scholars, they point out that Allah, when speaking about such dominating, such, overwhelming power and control, when Allah speaks about it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to Himself as Ar-Rahman. To remind us that yes, on that day, that true power, overwhelming power of Allah will be witnessed. And it will be scary. And it will be humbling. But remember that same Allah, in this dunya, He is accessible to us as Ar-Rahman. Very merciful. We can go to Him now. We can reconcile with Him right now. And find Him to be most merciful. And He will be most merciful on that day. To those who utilize the opportunity in this dunya to make good with God. He'll be good to them. But don't forget that He is Ar-Rahman. And then in the second part of the ayah, Allah says, وَكَانَ يَوْمًا عَلَى الْكَافِرِينَ عَسِيرًا. That day will be very harsh. Specifically upon the disbelievers. Those who rejected the belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah speaks about this in Surah Al-Muddathir as well. فَإِذَا نُقِرَ فِي النَّاقُورِ. That when the horn has been sounded, the day of judgment has occurred. فَذَلِكَ يَوْمَئِذٍ يَوْمٌ عَسِيرٌ. Then that day will be a very, very harsh day. عَلَى الْكَافِرِينَ غَيْرُ يَسِيرٌ. There will be nothing easy or pleasant about that day for those who disbelieved and rejected belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the beautiful thing is, as I mentioned before, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Ar-Rahman. And He's given us the opportunity to benefit from His mercy in this dunya. And those who do so, access His mercy in this world, He will be merciful to them in the hereafter. And specifically, there is such a beautiful narration that is so profound. What the Prophet ﷺ says here is so remarkably profound, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. If we would just pay attention. Imam Ahmad in his Musnad has a narration from Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiyallahu ta'ala anhu that قِيلَ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. Somebody asked, O Messenger of God, يوم كان مقداره 50,000 سنة ما أطول هذا اليوم. That somebody asked the Prophet ﷺ, Messenger of God, the day, Allah says in the Quran, the day that will be 50,000 years long, that's too long. It's too much to bear. Like worried, like a believer is worried. A Muslim, a Sahabi was worried. What are we going to do, Ya Rasulullah? How do we deal with that? And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, وَالَّذِي نَفْسِي بِيَدِهِ وَالَّذِي نَفْسِي بِيَدِهِ. I swear by the one who holds my life in his hands. I swear by Allah. إِنَّهُ لَيُخَفَّفُ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِ حَتَّى يَكُونَ أَخَفَّ عَلَيْهِ مِنْ صَلَاةٍ مَكْتُوبَةٍ يُصَلِّيهَا فِي الدُّنْيَا. That day for a believer will be so easy. So easy. That it will be easier than praying one salah in this dunya. It'll be easier than praying one salah in this dunya. First of all, you see the mercy in that. right? One salah, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. That's what it'll feel like to a believer, like 10 minutes. That in of itself is powerful. But subhanAllah, the Prophet ﷺ could have said 10 minutes. Or he could have said the time that it takes to eat something. Or the time that it takes to walk from here to there. But he gave the example of what? The time that it takes to offer your prayer. Thereby leaving a hint. You want this ease on that day? This is where you get it. Put your face on the ground in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you won't have to worry about 50,000 years. Allah will take care of you. Allah will be your host. You will be the guest of Ar-Rahman. Nuzulan min ghafurir rahim. You just have to humble yourself in this dunya. And you got it made over there for all of eternity. Just play it right. Do your part. So, وَكَانَ يَوْمًا عَلَى الْكَافِرِينَ عَسِيرًا. It'll be a day very difficult for the disbelievers. The scholars comment about the language of this ayah as very interesting. It's very fascinating. وَكَانَ يَوْمًا عَلَى الْكَافِرِينَ عَسِيرًا. وَكَانَ يَوْمًا عَسِيرًا عَلَى الْكَافِرِينَ. Normal sentence structure, ordinary sentence structure would have been وَكَانَ يَوْمًا عَسِيرًا عَلَى الْكَافِرِينَ. Allah says وَكَانَ يَوْمًا عَلَى الْكَافِرِينَ عَسِيرًا. That creates a meaning of exclusivity. It means that that day will be very difficult. It will be a very difficult day specifically for those who rejected to believe, refused to believe in Allah in this dunya. Those who just turned away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this dunya, for them it'll be difficult. And Allah makes this distinction so as not to worry the believers. You'll be okay. Just stay devoted and committed to Allah and your relationship with Allah and you'll be alright. Very beautifully, very powerfully Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this. And with that, inshaAllah, we'll stop here and we'll conclude here. I know we're ending a little earlier than we normally do. And that's because that's all I was able to prepare for. All right? It's a fact, right? I remember one time one of our teachers, he came to teach us in the class, and he ended quite early, right? He was one of those very punctual teachers. May Allah give me tawfiq. But he was one of those very punctual teachers, right? Like he'd walk in the first minute of class, and he'd leave the classroom in the last minute of the class. Like he's like, this is my time and I will take my entire time. All right? So one time he finished up kind of early and we were all kind of like little, what's going on? Is everything okay? And he said, I decided to end class earlier today because this is all I was able to prepare for. And we were like, oh, okay, that's a pretty straightforward answer. But in that, he kind of taught us a lesson. And hearing that was also kind of very strange. Like you're kind of like, you really need to prepare. And to be very honest, I need to prepare, but he probably didn't need to prepare. Right? Very, very senior scholar, very knowledgeable, very experienced. He'd been teaching that text that he was teaching on. He'd been teaching that same text. It was an advanced text of fiqh. It was for the fiqh of like marriage and nikah and talaq and family issues and relations. He'd been teaching that for over 20 years. Like he had it memorized. But he taught us a very valuable lesson kind of through that little interaction. He taught us a very valuable lesson that the knowledge of deen, especially here, this is the Quran. It's the kalam of Allah. He said it deserves the utmost respect and seriousness. You don't wing it. That's shameless. That's al-khiyana. That's betrayal of trust. Allah trusted you by putting you in a position to share the deen of Allah with people. And you walk up there and blah, blah, blah. A little bit of filler here, a little bit of filler there. Nobody knows any better. That's shameful. It's terrible. So you work, you prepare, you study, you research. And for the sake of your own discipline, Your own tarbiyah, your own discipline, your own humility. When you aren't prepared, when you are not ready, sit there and say, I'm not ready to teach. Nobody was born knowing everything or anything. Allah teaches all of us. And the Prophet ﷺ taught us. And our parents taught us. And then our teachers taught us. So you have to learn. And you have to read and you have to study. So that's my cover for not going any further. طيب سبحان الله وبحمده سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. السلام عليكم. Also, again, just a reminder as inshallah the adhan or the preparation for salah happens, remember kind of push the tables back so people can pray here inshallah.